It was one of those rainy evenings in the city when the streetlights reflected in golden puddles and the whole world seemed to slow down, except inside the towering glass building of Hamilton and Company, where the CEO's office glowed like a lighthouse above the storm. Down in the marble-floored lobby, a man named Daniel Reed was pushing a mop, his gray uniform sleeves rolled to the elbow, revealing work-worn arms. He'd been the night janitor for almost 2 years now, arriving quietly when most people were heading home, cleaning up the echoes of the day's business meetings and celebrations he was never part of. He kept his head down, earbuds in, listening to soft jazz, but tonight was different. Tonight the elevator doors slid open with a chime and out stepped none other than Victoria Hamilton herself, the CEO, in a fitted navy suit and heels that clicked sharply against the marble. She rarely came down this late, but she was clearly in a hurry, phone in hand, speaking to someone with clipped urgency. "No, I can't go alone. Yes, I know it's short notice. I'll figure something out," she said before hanging up and tucking the phone into her clutch. Daniel kept mopping, not expecting her to notice him, but then her eyes landed on him in a way that made him pause mid-swipe. "Daniel, right?" she asked, walking over. His eyebrows lifted in surprise. How did she even know his name? "Yes, ma'am," he said, standing straighter. She gave him a quick, appraising look, then took a deep breath as if making a decision right there on the spot. "I need a +1 for a very important corporate dinner tonight. My intended guest cancelled last minute, and I can't walk into that room alone. It's complicated. Would you come with me?" Daniel almost laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her expression was dead serious. "Me? Ma'am, I'm the janitor." "I'm not exactly." He trailed off, gesturing at his mop and work boots. "I know exactly who you are," she said, her voice calm but firm. "And tonight, I don't need a business partner or some PR prop. I need someone who won't play games. You're it. But you'd have to change quickly, we leave in 30 minutes. His heart pounded in his chest. Every sensible thought told him to say no, but something in her eyes, something urgent, almost vulnerable, made him nod. "All right. I'll do it." Minutes later, he was in the small staff locker room, changing into a spare dark suit he kept for funerals or job interviews that never panned out. The sleeves were a bit short, the tie slightly worn, but when he stepped back into the lobby, Victoria gave a faint smile. "You clean up well," she said, leading him to a sleek black town car. As they drove through the rain-slick streets, she filled him in. Tonight was a dinner with foreign investors and rival CEOs, the kind of room where everyone was measuring each other's worth in power and influence. Her late fiancé was supposed to be her escort, but he died suddenly a year ago, and she'd never replaced him in the social circuit. If she walked in alone tonight, it would spark gossip about weakness, something she couldn't afford. Daniel listened quietly, feeling far out of his depth but determined not to embarrass her. When they arrived at the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, the chandelier light spilled over them like molten gold, and heads turned as Victoria entered with the tall, mysterious man at her side. Whispers followed them. Who is he? Not a face anyone recognized from the business world. Daniel kept his posture steady, taking cues from her, offering his arm when she seemed to want it. Throughout the evening, he surprised himself. He didn't speak much, but when asked about himself, he told simple, honest stories of working hard jobs, of his mother's lessons on respect and humility, of fixing things with his hands. Strangely, the investors seemed charmed, and Victoria noticed it too, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. At one point, an older rival CEO, a silver-haired man named Prescott, leaned in and said, "Victoria, you've kept this one hidden well. Where have you been hiding him?" She just smiled and replied, "Right where he belongs." By dessert, Daniel could feel the dynamic in the room shifting, not just toward him, but toward her. The fact that she'd brought someone unexpected, someone unpolished yet dignified, made her seem even more formidable. When they left, stepping back into the rain, Victoria exhaled a long breath. "You were perfect tonight," she said, and for a second her eyes softened in a way that caught him off guard. But before he could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the curb, and a man in a dark coat stepped out, calling her name. Daniel felt her grip tighten on his arm. "Not now," she muttered under her breath, then to Daniel, "Stay close." The man's eyes narrowed as they landed on Daniel, and in that moment, Daniel realized, this wasn't just a dinner. Something else was going on. Something dangerous. And he was already in it. The rain was falling harder now, cold droplets misting the air as the man in the dark coat stepped closer, his eyes sharp and calculating, like he was measuring Daniel the way a chess player studies an unfamiliar piece on the board. "Victoria," he said, voice smooth but edged, "you didn't answer my calls." She straightened her shoulders, keeping her arm linked with Daniel's. "Because I had nothing to say to you, Marcus," she replied coolly. Daniel could feel the tension in her frame, the way her posture was armor, but under that was something brittle, like she was holding herself together by sheer will. Marcus's gaze flicked to Daniel. "And this is?" Victoria's lips curved in a faint, almost dangerous smile. "This is Daniel. My date." The word landed in the air like a deliberate move, and Daniel understood, his presence here wasn't just to fill a seat, it was to send a message. Marcus studied him, but Daniel didn't flinch, meeting his eyes with the steady calm of someone who'd had to stare down far worse in life than a man in an expensive coat. "Interesting," Marcus said finally, stepping back. "We'll talk soon, Victoria. You can't avoid me forever." He got back into the SUV, taillights disappearing into the rain, leaving a silence that hummed between them. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Daniel asked quietly as they got into the car. She hesitated, then said, "He's the CEO of Prescott Global, our biggest rival. He's been trying to force a merger on my terms, or rather, on his terms, which basically means stripping my company apart. He thought I'd be vulnerable without certain connections." She didn't say fiancé, but Daniel understood. "So you brought me," he said slowly, "to make him think you had someone in your corner." She turned to him then, her expression softening in a way that made her seem almost human beneath the power suit exterior. "I brought you because you don't play their games. You're not afraid to be yourself. And tonight, that mattered." They rode in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past, until she said, "You know, Daniel, you did more than you realize tonight. The investors were watching you, watching us. And some of them who've been on the fence for months. I think they'll be calling tomorrow." When they reached her building, she surprised him again by asking if he'd come up for a drink, not in the romantic sense, but as a thank you. He followed her into a penthouse that looked like something out of a design magazine, all glass and steel with the city spread out below. She poured them both a drink, and as they talked, Daniel found himself telling her things he hadn't told anyone in years, how he'd once dreamed of becoming an architect but life had other plans when his father got sick, how he'd worked every job from construction to night shifts just to keep a roof over his family's head. She listened, really listened, and when he finished, she said, "You know, you could still build something. Just because life didn't go one way doesn't mean it's over." He almost laughed, but there was something in her voice that made him believe her. Then her phone rang, and she excused herself, stepping into another room. Daniel sipped his drink, gazing out at the rain streaking down the windows, when he heard her voice, sharper now, urgent. "No, I'm not selling. You can tell Marcus he can take his threats," and she stopped abruptly, and when she came back, her face was composed, but her eyes said something was wrong. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I think I might have dragged you into something bigger than I intended." She explained in low tones, Marcus wasn't just a rival CEO, he had connections, dangerous ones, and he'd been using intimidation to force deals. Bringing Daniel had thrown him off balance, but it also meant Marcus would want to know who he was, and why she trusted him. Daniel's instinct was to walk away, he'd had enough of other people's battles. But then he remembered the way she'd looked tonight, walking into that room with her chin high, daring the world to underestimate her. He thought of the dozens of people like him who never got a chance to stand in those rooms, who never got seen. Then maybe, he said slowly, it's time someone stood up to him. Over the next week, Victoria pulled Daniel into her world, not just the dinners, but strategy meetings, private calls, even trips to job sites where her company was building projects that Marcus wanted to dismantle. She introduced him not as a janitor, but as someone she trusted. At first people looked skeptical, but Daniel's quiet intelligence and straightforward way of speaking won them over. He started offering ideas, not business jargon, just practical solutions from years of fixing problems with his hands. Victoria began to lean on him more, and the more he saw of her, the more he realized she wasn't just a cold, untouchable CEO. She was someone who'd had to fight for every inch of ground she stood on, someone who carried her losses like hidden scars. The final showdown came at a high-stakes board meeting where Marcus tried one last time to undermine her, bringing in false reports and threatening to pull investors. Daniel, sitting at the far end of the table, spoke up, not loudly, but with the kind of clarity that made the whole room turn. He laid out the truth, piece by piece, using simple logic no one could argue with, and when he finished, the vote went Victoria's way. Marcus left, seething, and Victoria turned to Daniel with a look that was part relief, part pride. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said. Later, as they walked out of the building into the crisp night air, she added, "You ever think about doing more than mopping floors?" He smiled faintly. "I am now." She laughed, the sound lighter than he'd ever heard it, and in that moment Daniel knew this was more than just a chance night. It was the start of something new, not just for her company, but for him.